Purvajakacharya Stotra Satashi Shimad, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prem Se Guru Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Dam Ki Jai, Mayapur Dam Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Dev Ki Jai, Tulasi Maharani Ki Jai, Samveda Bhaktivinda Ki Jai. Glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
Glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare
All
Krishna.
glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga.
Hare Hare.
Hari Bol.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om
Om
Namo
Namo
Bhagavate
Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, The Creation, Chapter 9, The Passing Away of Bhishma Deva in the Presence of Lord Krishna, Text 44. Sampadyamanam magyaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Babhuvuste Tushnim Vayam Shiva Dinatyaye Sampadyamanam magyaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Babhuvuste Tushnim Vayam Shiva Dinatyaye Sampadyamanamagyaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Babhuvuste Tushnim Vayam Shiva Dinatyaye. Everyone chant, please.
Hare Krishna. Sampadyamanam agyaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Babhuvuste Tushnim Vayam Shiva Dinatyaye.
Hare Krishna. Sambadhyamanam agyaya Bhisma Brahmana Niskale Sarve Vibhuvuste Tishnam Vyasiva Dinataye. Hare Krishna.
Sampadyamanam ajnaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Bhabuvuste Tushnim Vyam Siva Vayam Siva Dinatyaye.
Hare Krishna. Sampadyamanam agyaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Babhuvuste Tushnim Vayam Siva Dinatayaye. Hare Krishna.
Sampatyamanam ajnaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarva Babhuvaste Tushnim Vayam Shiva Dinatyaye.
Anyone else?
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sampadhyamana magyayam Vishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Babu Vuste Tushnim Vayam Siva Dinatyaye. Hare Krishna.
Okay, word for word translation. Sampadyamanam, having merged into. Agyaya, after knowing this. Bhishmam, about Sri Bhishma Dev. Brahmani, into the supreme absolute. Nishkali, unlimited. Sarve, all present. Babhuvute, all of them became. Tushnim, silent. Vayamsi, Eva, like birds. Dina Atyaye, at the end of the day. Translation. Knowing that Bhishma Dev had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute, all present there became silent, like birds at the end of the day. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. To enter into or to become merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute means to enter the original home of the living being. The living beings are all component parts and parcels of the absolute personality of Godhead, and therefore they are eternally related with Him as the servitor and the servant. The Lord is served by all His parts and parcels as the complete machine is served by its parts and parcels. Any part of the machine removed from the whole is no longer important. Similarly, any part and parcel of the Absolute detached from the service of the Lord is useless. The living beings who are in the material world are all disintegrated parts and parcels of the Supreme Whole, and they are no longer as important as the original parts and parcels. There are, however, more integrated living beings who are eternally liberated. The material energy of the Lord, called Durga Shakti, or the superintendent of the prison house, takes charge of the disintegrated parts and parcels, and thus they undergo a conditioned life under the laws of material nature. When the living being becomes conscious of this fact, he tries to go back home, back to Godhead, and thus the spiritual urge of the living being begins. This spiritual urge is called Brahma Jigyasa, or inquiry about Brahman. Principally, this Brahma Jigyasa is successful by knowledge, renunciation, and devotional service to the Lord. Jnana, or knowledge, means knowledge of everything of Brahman, the Supreme. Renunciation means detachment of material affection, and devotional service is the revival by practice of the original position of the living being. The successful living beings who are eligible to enter into the realm of the Absolute are called the Jnanis, the Yogis, and the Bhaktas. The Jnanis and Yogis enter into the impersonal rays of the Supreme, but the Bhaktas enter into the spiritual planets known as the Vaikunthas. In these spiritual planets, the Supreme Lord as Narayan predominates, and the healthy, unconditioned living beings live there by rendering loving service to the Lord in the capacity of servant, friend, parents, and fiancé. There, the unconditioned living beings enjoy life in full freedom with the Lord, whereas the impersonalist Jnanis and Yogis enter into the impersonal glowing effulgence of the Vaikuntha planets. The Vaikuntha planets are all self-illuminating like the sun, and the rays of the Vaikuntha planets are called the Brahma Jyoti. The Brahma Jyoti is spread unlimitedly, and the material world is but a covered portion of an insignificant part of the same Brahma Jyoti. This covering is temporary, and therefore it is a sort of illusion. Bhishma Dev, as the pure devotee of the Lord, entered the spiritual realm in one of the Vaikuntha planets, where the Lord in his eternal form of Parthasarati predominates over the unconditioned living beings who are constantly engaged in the service of the Lord. The love and affection which binds the Lord and devotee are exhibited in the case of Bhishmadev. Bhishmadev never forgot the Lord in his transcendental feature as the Parthasarati, and the Lord was present personally before Bhishmadev while he was passing to the transcendental world. That is the highest perfection of life. What a great purport. Sampadyamanamagyaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale Sarve Babuste Tushnim Vayam Shiva Dinatyaye. Knowing that Bhishmadev had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute, all present there became silent like birds at the end of the day. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pushtaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pachayane Nirvisheshashanadi Paschadade Shatarane. So just in the previous verse was the actual passing of Mahajan Bhishmadev. So for those present, we can simply try to imagine what a deep and emotional scene it was. And perhaps also how it cemented into Yudhishthira's mind the gravity of the teachings which he had received from Bhishmadev just previously. So this verse is very, very interesting and very beautiful. And some of the wording that Vyasadeva used in this verse are even a little bit equivocal, might not be the right word, but some of the wording is puzzling, and one might also almost guess that Vyasadeva used this wording to stimulate our thought process and our analytical process to understand what he's saying and what's being said here. Some of the words that are significant is sampadya, sampadyamanam. This means to become perfect, or to become complete, or to enter into or to merge into something is sampadhyamana. Prabhupada says sampadyamanam, having merged into. So this is in itself a little puzzling. It's not in our usual Vaishnava vocabulary of our desired goal at the end of life. We don't often speak of merging into something as desirable. And what is it that Bhishmadev is being described as merging into? Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale. This is also puzzling. Brahmani. Brahmani means Brahman, the Brahman. Brahman means the Brahma Jyoti. It also means anything that is the greatest or the most powerful. So Krishna is also Brahman, but generally we call Krishna Param Brahman. And this word Nishkale is also interesting. Again, Prabhupada translates Nishkale, let's see, unlimited. Different meanings of Nishkale. Nishkale means unlimited, or without any boundary, or without any parts, or without any divisions. So you could say Brahmani Nishkale, one possible translation, means the undivided or undifferentiated Brahman. So what does that mean? That Vyasadeva is saying Bhishmadev merged into the undifferentiated Brahman. As Vaishnavas, we may become puzzled or astounded at this kind of language being used. And of course, Prabhupada takes the opportunity of the purport to explain what's actually being said, what's actually going on. So Bhishmadev, he breathed his last. He was seen by the others to pass away. And it said, yes, he disappeared. He merged into the undivided, what did Prabhupada say? Merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute. And all became silent, just like birds at the end of the day. So this is Babuva Tushnim, become silent. Everyone became silent at the time of Bhishmadev passing due to the heaviness and the emotion and the significance of the event. Babuva Tushnim, Just like Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna is arguing with Krishna, he says, Na yotsya iti govindam uktva tushnim babuvaha. So tushnim babuva, the same words, just in different order. Babuva tushnim or tushnim babuva means the same thing. When Arjuna said to Krishna, "Oh Govinda, I shall not fight," and then he fell silent. So everyone fell silent at the time of Bhishma Dev's disappearance. So before we start examining the purport and the meaning of these words a little bit, let's remember Bhishma Dev's history. He was one of the Vasus in the heavenly planets, one of the demigods in the heavenly planets. And we heard probably more than once about the curse and how he came to this world as the son of Ganga and grew up to become the Bhishma Dev that we all know and love. So what happens at the time of his disappearance? So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that an amsha of Bhishma Dev existed as this Vasu in the heavenly planets. And as Prabhupada explains, Bhishma Dev himself returned to the spiritual world to worship and serve at the lotus feet of Parthasarathi for eternity. But that Amsa remained in the heavenly planets as Vasu, the demigod. And Prabhupada, in Srila Sanatana Goswami explains in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that many of the associates of the Lord, they have different expansions in the spiritual world, and they also appear in the material world and also in the heavenly planets in different positions. And there's so many examples of that. Kartikeya is considered to appear in Krishna Lila as Shamba. And Kamadev, Cupid, the god of love, appears as Pradyumna. And in the 10th canto, there's actually at the very beginning describing Krishna's appearance in this world. It's described that all of the Brijavasis and all of the Yadu dynasty and all of them were actually great demigods who had all taken birth in this world to take part in Krishna's pastimes. So when that happens, it doesn't mean that the residences of the demigods are now empty. No one's there. They're appearing by expansion. So these multiple expansions are there. There's Vasudeva and Devaki were also present as demigods, as Prajapatis, Prishni and Sutapa. Nanda and Yashoda were also the great Vasus, Drona and Dara. So these different expansions are a common thing, and these are going on. Brishabhanu and Kirtida previously were Sucharu and Kalavati. So all of these different great devotees, actual eternal associates of Krishna, but at the same time, they have expansions within the material realm and within the realm of the demigods through their expansions to also perform these different functions. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in this regard, he quotes from Vedanta Sutra, Om Yavad Adikaram Avastatir Adikari Kanam. So we may, if anyone remembers last week's class, these Om Yavad Adikaram, this word may be a little bit familiar. When we were discussing the different kinds of servants of the Lord, one of them are the Adikrita, those who are appointed to accept a certain position as demigod, as servants of the Lord. So Om Yavad Adikaram Avastitir Adikari Kanam. That those, even if they're liberated, even if they're pure souls, great souls, they may take a position as appointed by the Lord within the realm of the demigod. So that's the meaning of this. And this is what's going on with Bhishma Dev. He's returning to the spiritual world, but his Amsha is also existing in the demigod realm as this Vasu. So this is, and there's other examples. Vidura was actually Yamaraj, and he arranged for a curse to be made by Manduka Muni so he could be cursed and come and appear as Vidura in this world. So many cases of demigods and great eternal devotees having a simultaneous existence like that. So this is the great Bhishma Dev. So going back to the verse itself, how do we understand this description of the liberation of Bhishmadev? Sampadyamanam agyaya Bhishmam Brahmani Nishkale. This seeming description of him merging into Brahman. So first of all, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti gives a very interesting and, I don't know, not exactly humorous, but very clever description. He gives an alternate translation of the verse. Prabhupada says, knowing that Bhishmadev had merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute, all present there became silent, like birds at the end of the day. So Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti rearranges the words a little bit. He takes agyaya to mean ignorance, like agyana, to mean ignorance. And he says, and his translation states that those who were ignorant, they thought that Bhishmadev merged into the impersonal Brahman, just like foolish birds become silent at the end of the day. And in his commentary, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that birds are stupid. They're so foolish that when at the end of the day, you know, early in the morning, just as the sun is just starting to brighten the sky a little bit, anywhere you are, if your window's open, you'll hear the birds start chirping early in the morning, and they're singing all day long. But when the sun goes down, the birds become silent. And he says they're so foolish, these birds, that when the sun goes down, they think, oh, the sun is finished. There's no more sun, and thus they become silent in lamentation, thinking that the sun is dead. So this is the foolishness of the birds. Just like in English, we have this expression, you call someone bird, you're a bird brain. It means you're foolish. I don't know if that's an expression in other languages or not. But he says these birds are foolish. The sun goes down and they think, oh, the sun is finished, lament. So similarly, the people who became silent were all foolish, thinking, oh, Bhishmadev is gone, or Bhishmadev has merged into the impersonal Brahman. They're foolish, just like the birds who think, oh, the sun is gone, not knowing that the sun continues to exist and will also appear again in just a few hours after the passing of the nighttime. The sun will appear again. So similarly, they're not realizing, first of all, they're not realizing that he didn't merge into the impersonal Brahman. He returned to the lotus, as Prabhupada explains in the purport, he returned to the lotus feet of Parthasarathi in the Vaikuntha planets. And not only that, as Krishna's pastimes continually unfold within the material world, when he disappears in one universe, in one creation, he at the next moment, he's appearing in another universe, and after that in another. So in this way, he's eternally existing in Vaikuntha, and at the same time, his pastimes are continually going on again and again and again in all the different cycles of creation in the material world, in all the different universes. And as he's doing that, Bhishmadev is traveling with him, and Arjuna is traveling with him, and Radha and all the cowherd boys and Krishna's parents are all traveling with him through all these different iterations of his pastimes and all the sequences of creation in the material world. So this is what the foolish people at the who were present at the disappearance of Bhishmadev were thinking, and thus they or they didn't know that, and thus they became silent, not knowing that these eternal pastimes are continually going on. This is from a little description of this from the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, describing Krishna's disappearance from this world. Uddhava says that Krishna is just like the sun. He's the sun of the world, and now he's gone. This is 327. Sri Uddhava said, my dear Vidura, the sun of the world, Lord Krishna, has set, and our house has now been swallowed by the great snake of time. What can I say to you about our welfare? So in the purport, Prabhupada explains, as the sun appears in the morning and gradually rises to the meridian and then again sets in one hemisphere, while simultaneously rising in the other. So Lord Krishna's disappearance in one universe and the beginning of his different pastimes in another take place simultaneously. As soon as one pastime is finished here, it is manifested in another universe. And thus his Nitya Lila, or eternal pastimes, are going on without ending. As the sunrise takes place once in 24 hours, similarly, the pastimes of Lord Krishna take place in a universe once in a daytime of Brahma. So we know that those who are foolish materialists think that the end of the body is the end of life. Similarly, Mayavadis don't understand that for a pure devotees, the end of life is also not the end of his relationship with Krishna or the end of his pastimes with Krishna. They continue on and on eternally. Krishna and the great devotees reciprocating these loving pastimes and loving feelings between each other. So this is the foolishness of, especially of the Gyanis, who can't conceive of or refuse to conceive of a personal liberation, and the Karmis as well. The Gyanis think, oh, everything ends, the body ends, the material world ends, it's all illusion. I reject this and just accept this impersonal Brahman. And the foundation of this is actually the materialism of the Karmis. The Karmis are accepting the body and the material world as everything. And thus the Karmis are devoting their entire lives to pursuing illusory happiness within the material body, through the material senses, and through the manipulation of the material energy in the material world. And when this, and as it inevitably does, becomes frustrating and blocked and impossible to attain, then some persons become Gyanis and they say, oh, this material life is suffering. This material body is suffering. All these material relationships and all these different persons are all suffering. Therefore, I reject. I reject all of it. And the alternative is void, nothing. No more body, no more person, no more world, no more emotions, no more relationships, all finished, make void. So this impersonal liberation is simply a negative version of materialistic life. It's the actual materialism is the actual inspiration for impersonalism. Let's see. Prabhupada again explains in a nice lecture. He says, they have got bitter experience of this vigraha, of this form. Therefore, they want to make God impersonal. Must be opposite. They have got this bitter knowledge that getting this body, we are suffering so much. Therefore, God must be without body. Just opposite. This is also material thinking in a negative way. But they have no positive knowledge that if God has a body, but that body is completely spiritual, it has nothing to do with the material body. They cannot think of a spiritual body. So this is the bad logic and the bad reasoning of the impersonalists, this process of negation. But although it's bad logic and bad reasoning and born out of frustration, it has a certain attractiveness. Some of us, I certainly did, may have flirted with different variations of Mayavad philosophy before our coming to Krishna consciousness, thinking just like this, that, oh, this material world is so awful and painful. There has to be an alternative. And if you don't have positive knowledge, then your alternative may just turn out to be some impersonal negation. And therefore, we have poets and philosophers and writers who very often will turn to Indian knowledge in the Vedas, and more often than not will draw out of it some impersonal conclusion. Like in the hippie times, there was like Alan Watts and the Tao of Physics drawing some impersonal conclusion. Aldous Huxley and his perennial philosophy drawing impersonalism from the Vedic knowledge. And then the coming of Rascal Vivekananda and spreading the idea of Indian philosophy as impersonalism. So this is what happens. Or even in Vedic tradition, we have like the four Kumaras. There were 4 Kumaras came, and Lord Brahma said, okay, get married and have children, become Prajapatis. And they said, oh, this material world is just suffering and entanglement. Why would I possibly want to get married and produce children? So in the same way, they rejected it and they became Brahmavadis, not devotees. They became Brahmavadis. But then eventually, because they were very intelligent and because they also got the special mercy of seeing Krishna and seeing his relationship with his devotees and smelling the beautiful flowers and tulsi and chandan of the Lord's lotus feet. Because of that, their mind and their emotions and their intelligence was awakened, and they came to the conclusion that God is a person, and they became great devotees. So this is the twisted mentality of the impersonalists. So therefore, Vishwanath Chakravarti says, these foolish people, just these bird brains thinking that, oh, Bhishmadev has merged into some impersonalism rather than actually going to be with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And this philosophy, this impersonalism, will never satisfy the living being, because the living being actually is a person with mind and intelligence and senses and desires, and denying that will not satisfy and can only be tolerated for so long. Just like once Prabhupada was speaking in Mayapur, they were walking through, Prabhupada used to go for walks through the rice fields around the Mayapur temple, back when it was less developed than it is now. And he was describing how a person who lives in Kolkata, then he would say Calcutta, would be so, disgusted by the noise and the smoke and the pollution and the dirt and the intense crowd of people. Will be so disgusted by that it'll come out to Mayapur, and they'll come out to this empty field of just, clods of earth. And at first they'll feel, oh, what a relief, how nice. And just, But then after a little while, they'll start missing people and missing relationships and missing sense gratification. And he said, and then they'll go back. Because of that, they'll go back to Calcutta. So this is exactly analogous to the impersonalists who try to deny the personality of Krishna, the personality of themselves, and the reality of a loving relationship with Krishna. The exact same thing happens. Genye ravindaksha vimuktamaninas tvayasta bhava avishudha budaya aruya kritrena padam tata padanchito najita yusmarangraya. This beautiful verse from the 10th canto, that they spend so much time speculating and meditating and studying and performing severe austerities, all while completely neglecting the lotus feet of Krishna, who has beautiful eyes, just like blooming lotus petals. And because of this great study and meditation and austerity and mental gymnastics, despite that avishudha budaya, their consciousness still remains contaminated. And in that contaminated consciousness, they attain what is called vimukta manina. Within their mind, they're thinking they're liberated. They're not actually liberated, but they're thinking themselves liberated by all of these processes of negation and impersonalism and speculation and jnana, separate from worshiping the lotus feet of Krishna. And because of that, because of this impure consciousness, they cannot remain in that position of imagined liberation. Patantiro najita yusmarangraya. Because they neglect Krishna's lotus feet, they must fall down from that position of imagined superiority. So this is the position of this impersonal liberation. It's not interesting to the devotees. It's not desired by the devotees. And even those who desire it cannot remain there. It's not a permanent situation because it is not compatible with the actual nature of the spirit soul. And a devotee especially abhors this impersonal liberation. He'll never take that. He'll never accept that. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu has one very nice verse spoken by Hanuman. Hanuman says, where is Bhava Bandha Chide Tasyai Sprihami Namuktaye Bhavan Prabor Aham Dasa Iti Yatra Vilupyate. Hanuman says, I have no desire for liberation, even though liberation is Bhava Bandha Chide. This liberation, it breaks all the material bonds. You're completely free from material life. But tasyai sprihami namukte, but I have no desire for this liberation. Why? Bhavan prabor aham dasa iti yatra vilupyate. Because when you attain that personal liberation, this conception of Bhavan prabor aham dasa, which means Bhavan prabor, you Krishna, but this is Hanuman speaking. So you, Lord Ramachandra, are my master, and aham dasa, and I am your humble servant. This conception is destroyed by impersonal liberation. So he has no desire for this impersonal liberation. Therefore, for the devotee, the real liberation, this is described in Bhagavatam, muktir hitvanyata rupam swarupena vyavastati. Real liberation doesn't mean impersonal. It doesn't mean formlessness. It doesn't mean simply a knee-jerk negation of the material world. It's not simply negation, it's a positive acceptance. An acceptance of what? Muktir hitvanyata rupam. Giving up all your extraneous forms, all your extraneous conceptions of who you are, what yourself is. Swarupena vyavastati, and accepting your actual spiritual form in relationship with Krishna. This is actual liberation, not this impersonal idea, but actually understanding that I have a material form and material life which I neglect and reject, and an actual spiritual form and spiritual loving relationship with Krishna, which I embrace. Or even more famously than Hanuman's verse, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Mama Janmani Janmani Shure Bhavatad Bhakti Rahaitu Twai. He has no interest in liberation at all. He prefers to stay in this material world. If liberation means no relationship with Krishna, he doesn't want that. Better to remain in this material world and remain the servant of Krishna. It's also described that there are 5 types of liberation. Liberation by attaining the planet of the Lord, Salokya. Liberation of attaining a form like the Lord, Sarupya. Liberation of attaining opulences like the Lord, Sarshti. And liberation by becoming a personal associate of the Lord, Samipya. And the 5th kind of liberation is Ekatva, becoming one with the Lord. And Kapila Muni in the 3rd canto, I can't remember now, describes that devotees never desire any of these kinds of liberation. They don't even demand or desire, oh, let me get opulence like the Lord, or a spiritual form like the Lord, or even to be an associate of the Lord. All they want to do is be the servant of the Lord. And what to speak of Ekatva? It's also explained, Prabhupada explains, that sometimes if the Supreme Lord insists to the devotee that you accept a spiritual form, or you come back to my Goloka or Vaikuntha planets to be with me, if the Lord insists, the devotee may accept those first 4 types of liberation: getting a spiritual form, opulence, living with the Lord on his planet, and becoming an associate of the Lord. He may accept these, but never under any circumstance will the devotee ever accept a katva, accept oneness of the Lord, or merging with the Lord, or merging into the Brahman. They'll never accept that hellish situation, because it destroys the conception that Bhavam Prabhor Aham Dasa, that you are my Lord and I am your servant. Especially for someone like Bhishma, so much in love with Krishna and with this very unique, special, beautiful relationship with Krishna. Those foolish people that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains thinking like that, this is so offensive to Bhishma Dev. Just like who was it at the disappearance of Madhavendra Puri? Was it Ramachandra Puri, his bogus disciple, when he was passing away, and he said to Madhavendra Puri, oh, why are you lamenting? Just be satisfied in Brahman. This is so offensive, and because of that, he was so cursed and so rejected by everyone. But Ishwara Puri understood the mood of his spiritual master and served him nicely. So this is the offensive idea, offensive to Bhishma, oh, you'll merge into Brahman, which is the most hated thing for a devotee. Prabhupada would call it spiritual suicide. So the devotee will never do that. Like in the material world, you can understand someone who's very suffering or very disturbed or has no hope may consider suicide. But in spiritual life, this spiritual suicide should never be embraced. It's a sign of, deep, deep offense and deep, deep misunderstanding, that the devotee always has this hope that I could serve Krishna. So going back to Srila Prabhupada's purport, he explains it very nicely. Very first line of the purport: to enter into or to become merged into the unlimited eternity of the Supreme Absolute means to enter the original home of the living being. This is the liberation that is actually being described by Sampadyamanam Brahmani Nishkalam. It's not an impersonal merging, but it's entering into your home, to be with Krishna and to remain eternally the servant of Krishna and exchange these loving relationships with Krishna. And then Prabhupada gives a very brilliant example or analogy. He says, just like in some machine, the machine has different parts, and every little part, even a little screw or little insignificant little spring or screw, or now everything is electronic, so a little chip or whatever, some diode or electronic thing. It's such an insignificant little thing. Sometimes nowadays, everything's so small, even microscopic. But it's an important part of the functioning of the whole machine. But if you take that little part, that little screw, that little item out of the machine, then it's useless. Some little screw, it's useless. And he uses these very interesting words about the part of the machine. When it's integrated in the machine, then it's important. And when it's disintegrated, then it's no longer important. This is also from a Prabhupada lecture. He says, so the spirit soul, individual soul, is part and parcel of Krishna. Therefore, it is his duty to remain with the whole. Just like a mechanical part, a screw in a typewriter machine. If the screw remains with the machine, then it has got value. And if the screw remains without the machine, it has no value. Who cares for a small screw? But when that screw is wanting in a machine, then you go to purchase and they will charge you $5. Why? Because when it is fixed up with the machine, then it has got value. So this is a very excellent analogy. I really enjoy this a lot. The analogy and also Prabhupada's use of words that our intrinsic value as jivas, we're so tiny, 1/10,000th, the tip of a hair, and so impotent and so small and so tiny and insignificant that we're just barely on this side of nothingness. But when we're in our relationship with Krishna, then we become valuable. we become significant, we become powerful even, and great. Because we're in our constitutional position as part of the greater machine of Krishna's relationship, loving relationship with all of his devotees. We also discussed last week how Krishna is Akila Rasamrita Murti. He's the form, the personality who is reciprocating in this intricate exchange or machine, however you want to imagine it, with every single living being. And when we do that, we're important, we're valuable, and we're integrated. And if we reject that, then we're unimportant, we're valueless, and we're disintegrated. So this is a wonderful example. And especially I like Prabhupada's use of this word integrated and disintegrated. It carries a lot of interesting weight and a lot of interesting meaning. This word integrated, integrate, actually comes, as so many words do, through a long, twisted etymological path, comes from a Sanskrit word, twag. Twag means skin. So you could hear twag and integrate, this syllable, teg and twag. It comes from twag or skin. Skin is the source of the sense of touch. So integrate, in means negation or the opposite of. So integrate means untouched or unbroken or uncontaminated. So just like in mathematics, we have integers, which are the whole numbers, the unbroken numbers, like 1, 2, 3, these are whole numbers or integers. And then we have numbers that are broken, like fractions, 1/2 or 3/4 or whatever. So integrate means to make one, or to make complete, or to make whole. This is the actual meaning of this Sampadyamanam Brahma Nishkali. It's not impersonal merging, but it's sharing a oneness with Krishna through our service to Krishna and our relationship with Krishna. And if we don't do that, then we're disintegrated. Disintegrated means we're no longer in oneness with Krishna. We're no longer in our loving relationship with Krishna. But this word disintegrated in English, we also say if something disintegrates, we mean it's like finished and destroyed and, reduced to nothing. Just like Bhagavad Gita 262 starts off describing Sangat Sanjayate Kama, that if you contemplate the objects of the senses, lust develops, or attachment develops, and then lust, and then anger, and then from anger comes bewilderment and loss of memory, and then loss of intelligence, smriti brahmsad buddhi nasho. Then when your intelligence is destroyed, buddhi nashat pranashiti. Just like if the part that is separated from the machine, or the jiva who is separated from relationship with Krishna, is disintegrated or destroyed or reduced to nothing. So when you fall into the material world, buddhi nashat pranashiti. Pranashiti also means completely destroyed. Now, of course, it's not that the jiva is completely destroyed, literally, because the jiva, we're eternal. We all know that we're eternal. So we're not literally destroyed, but our relationship with Krishna is destroyed. Our engagement as a part of the complete whole in loving relationship with Krishna and all of his devotees is destroyed. That's what's destroyed. So this is the position of what real liberation is. It means being integrated, not in the horrible, horrible sense of being merged. The devotee, this is so appalling to the devotee. Prabodhananda Saraswati says, Kaivalya Narakayate, Chidashapur Akasha Pushpayate, that for the devotee who's received just the merciful sidelong glance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, such a devotee thinks this impersonal liberation, Kaivalya Narakayate, it's like going to hell. And the abode of the demigods, which is so attractive to the Veda Vadaratis, the Vedic materialists, the pious materialists, all want to go to the heavenly planets. And that, it's just like an illusion, like a will of the wisp. And for the yogis who are so absorbed in trying to control their senses, for a devotee of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the senses are like serpents with their fangs broken out. They can no longer cause any fear or cause any harm. And the great demigods, Brahma, Shiva, all the demigods in the heavenly planets who are so big and so powerful, such a devotee sees them as being just like insects. So this is the position of the devotee. They'll never for an instant consider this impersonal liberation. And even personal liberation, they're not exactly hankering for that. They're hankering to be integrated into the service of Krishna. And if that happens, Krishna may accept them into his planet or into his association or into his opulence. That is why the definition of pure devotional service is anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhyanavritam. That this material hankering and this impersonal liberation hankering has to be eliminated. This prevents having even a trace of these will prevent us from practicing pure devotional service. That's the negation, what needs to be gotten rid of. This materialistic conception that I want to enjoy in the material world, and the spiritual conception that I want to negate the material world. These both have to be rejected. And what's accepted? Anukulena Krishnanu Shilanam Bhaktir Uttamam. Accepting the favorable and bona fide and properly done service to Krishna as an integrated part in the machine, as the insignificant screw in the typewriter, or the insignificant jiva in Krishna's pastimes. Even remaining, like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, even just being a speck of dust at Krishna's lotus feet. This is better than being Brahma, or being a king, or being president, or being rich, or having sex, or having any material enjoyment you could imagine. Just to be a speck of dust at Krishna's lotus feet, because then you are integrated. And if not, then you're disintegrated. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Is there any question or comment or discussion?
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for wonderful session. So it was
Thank you.
really wonderful and amazing. So Hare Krishna, dear devotees, if you have any question, comment, and, so please go ahead, unmute, and you can go ahead, or you can raise the hand also.
Unfortunately, the weather today doesn't look like we'll be able to have Sunday feast outside. Although last week I also thought it was, but the rain came. But it's a cold, rainy day today, so we'll see. Anything?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it in the forecast. You're correct.
Yeah.
I think you covered it very well, and Srila Prabhupada did. I was also just want to comment that I was just surprised how Srila Prabhupada, he used the words merge, how Bhishma Dev merged, because oftentimes Srila Prabhupada will take the like he'll translate,
right.
Something as
he'll translate in a way that is
Bhakti yoga, or the pure devotional service. They'll say instead of he'll translate dharma as devotional service or something. Right. Like he'll do that. So surprising that he used that here.
I noticed that also. It was almost like the actual Sanskrit was so blatant that he couldn't ignore it.
Right.
And then he explained it so beautifully in the purport. But like I said at the beginning, it's interesting. I don't know Vyasadev's mind or why he used those words, but it really sets it up for an analysis, for a discussion about that, what it means. And someone who's ignorant of the Bhagavatam, or someone who's ill-motivated, will take one verse like that out of context and say, oh yeah, Bhishma Dev got impersonal liberation, not understanding the context of the whole Bhagavatam. And when you take it in that context and with Prabhupada's purport, then it becomes clearer. But yeah, it is striking, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Hare Krishna. Thank you very
Hare
much,
Krishna.
everybody. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
Any announcement or just bring your raincoats?
Yeah, no, bring your raincoats. Like you said, happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Today's
All
Mother's
the
Day.
7 mothers.
Yes. And we hope to see everybody tonight at 4:30. Jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everybody. Vancha kalpatarubhishta.
Krishna,
Namo
Thank you, Acharya.
All glories to Srila